Sup you guys, I'm Looney. Welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I thought I'd share everything I read in June. So for the month of June, I managed to read 7 books, and let's go through a list of them. But little disclaimer before we get into it, I read books based off vibes. I hardly ever read anything that I know I won't enjoy. So yeah, what I like you might not like, and there's that. So to start off the month of June, the first book I read was Ace of Spades. This is actually a reread for me. I read this like 2 years ago on a trip, and essentially the premise of this book is that Chiamaka and Devin are the 2 black students of a private high school, and their lives at that high school were pretty normal. And then senior year hits and they start getting threatened, and they're trying to get to the bottom of it because the school's not getting to the bottom of it. When I originally read it, I gave it 5 stars, but there's like, I bumped it down to a 4, which is still a pretty good rating, because there are certain parts of it that I didn't particularly agree with how it was written, but it was a very good book overall. And the visceral, gut-wrenching reaction I had to reading it for the first time 2 years ago is the exact same feeling and gut-wrenching sentiment I got from reading it the second time. This book, I would give the warning, there is racism and homophobia, and there is mention of like dubious consent, possible essay. Read at your own discretion, but definitely recommend for you to read this. The second book, another reread for me, Clara and the Sun. This was actually originally assigned to me in an English class, and with the movie coming out, I saw the trailers not too long ago, I decided it'd be a good idea for me to reread it. But it essentially follows Clara. This book is from her perspective. She's an artificial friend who her whole life, or her life as a robot, essentially, she's lived in this store and she's kind of waiting for a human being to come get her. And there's a lot of emphasis about her being a special robot, given she seems to observe humans very well and she can pick up on their behaviors, and she adapts very well to human beings. And there's one particular girl she ends up meeting, and that's the family that do end up buying her, and a whole bunch of crazy stuff in this book. I really liked it. That's why I reread it. I thought it'd be really fun to reread. Don't know if I'll watch the movie. I'll let you guys know, but I gave this a 4 stars. Third book, Down and Out in London in Paris by George Orwell. So this book was actually like a diary and recounting of his personal experiences living in poverty in London and in Paris during the Great Depression. The majority of this book is spent during his time in Paris, and basically he had the job of a plongeur, which are the dishwashers who are at the bottom of the hotel like staff hierarchy. And he draws a lot of differences between not only the hotel staff but also the people who were able to afford to go to such luxurious hotels in Paris despite everyone else living in poverty. And then the second half of the book, or the lesser portion of the book, he is living in London, and he describes like the very humiliating experience, and that London is so much harsher with like people who are living in poverty in comparison to France. And he draws the comparison. I do have one quote that I will read, page 214. I'll just put it up on the screen. I'll put it up on the screen. I can't find it right now. Yeah, he described himself living in the Spike, which are basically these cells that people would go in for one night and then they have to clear out for the morning, and they get one meal. And he would describe the the very harsh conditions living in the Spike. I really enjoyed this book. I gave this a 4 out of 5. You could tell like these are the real experiences, like the very specific things he describes. You know when you know a rich person makes art trying to describe poverty and you can tell they've never experienced those things. I like that this book wasn't like that at all. Great book. Defo recommend for you to read. Now the fourth book, To Have and Have Not by Ernest Hemingway. This book for you guys, sorry, I'm looking through my notebook, follows different perspectives, but it's mostly focused upon this fisherman, Harry, who spends his time working both in Cuba and in the south of Florida. He spends most of his time fishing, but by the time fishing, it is the Great Depression when this book is happening. The fishing business kind of tanks, which means he's kind of out of a job, but he has kids and the kids need to be fed. And we see him transition into illegally smuggling alcohol or people into the US, because if you didn't know, there was actually a alcohol ban in the US between 1920 and 1933, my bad. There's a whole slew of like bad decisions that are made. The other perspectives we get in the book are from the rich people who also live in these parts, and how the essential lesson I got from this book was that poor people and rich people have problems alike, and it manifests in different ways. But I would say this book was a 3 for me, because I got reminded very quickly that this book was definitely written in the 1920s and 30s. Like if I told you, oh, take a shot every single time you see a slur in this book, you get alcohol poisoning, and then you could probably sue me. But it was a really good book. I did like most of it, slurs aside. But I really enjoyed reading this book, and I think you should read it too. The fifth book I read was Murder at Brighton Express, and this is the 9th book from the Cleo Fox series, which basically follows the end of her vacation. She's in another city with her family for vacation, and she realizes someone's been following her around. She receives a blackmail note, and she meets up with the person who sent the blackmail note. But when they get on the train to go back to London, the girl gets on the train, but she notices the girl had never got off the train. And basically she tries to figure out what happened, because this girl's death was ruled as a self-inflicted. But because she was there as this girl was on, she knew that couldn't have been the case. So yeah, she goes off to solve it. I really like this book too. It's always nice to see Harry and Cleo banter a lot. I really enjoyed it. 4.25 out of 5 stars for me. And yeah, the 6th book I read is What is the What by Dave Eggers. And this book is a autobiography, not his autobiography, but of a man named Valentino Achakadang. And basically from age 7 he had to flee his village of Muriel Bay because there was the Second Sudanese Civil War, and he has to trek hundreds of miles across 3 countries, so Sudan, Kenya, and Ethiopia, to get resettled into either refugee camps or different places until he is of age and eventually moves to the US. I really enjoyed how this story was told, even though Valentino isn't the one who writes the story. The author, Dave, makes a really good job as to make sure we hear Valentino's voice throughout the story. And what's very interesting about the story is that it's separated, the timeline of the story is separated and in reflection to him currently living in the US and thinking about the events that have happened. So he like, it's as if he tells the story to 3 different people, but he's telling the story to them in his head. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't think I've ever read any book like that. I would definitely recommend for you to read it because the subject material in the book is war. I would give you the warning for mass deaths, war, sexual assault, domestic violence, so bear that in mind. And if you do read this book, I gave this book a 5, another 5 for this year. I really enjoyed this book that I'm definitely hoping to make a longer video about it. And yeah, the last book to wrap up the month of June I read was Like Real People Do by E.L. Massey. So this first book, it's a series, follows a closeted NHL captain named Alex Price and Elijah Rodriguez, who initially clash, then they become friends, and they end up becoming a relationship. And because Alex is the captain of an NHL team, we see him navigate his own struggles with his own internalized homophobia, or we see all the slightly harder conversations that they have to have, because when people think of hockey, it's technically considered a relatively conservative sport. I really like that this book was not a struggle story. Whenever we talk about marginalized people, sometimes it's very common for stories to be very centered around struggle, and sometimes I'm like, let's not write books like that. So I really enjoyed this series. I will be reading the next 2 books for the month of July. And I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you so much for watching my video. Let me know what books you have read, if you're going to read any of the books. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.